Thank you so much, Jonathan, and thank you everyone for being here. First of all, my name's Jeanine Canty, just to clarify, and I know someone. Yeah, that's fine, totally fine. And I just really want to honor this moment. I was able to attend most of the presentations yesterday, and was also just so incredibly touched by Stephen's presentation, and I feel like they weave very nicely together. Been almost 4 years to the day that my father passed away. In fact, his ashes are on the top bookshelf behind me, and I'm here right now with my mother. And so, really, just yeah, feeling tender with the stories about his mother and mother-in-law and all of our mothers. And so, yeah, I'm a professor at CIS in the Transformative Studies program. And so I really root myself as a transdisciplinary scholar, merging so many things together. And if we can go to the next slide. Yeah, and it's a mouthful, but just in terms of the presentation, really looking at how the foundations of eco-psychology are really about bringing together the environmental movement and psychology and how they're both needed, and seeing ourselves as ecological beings, and also bringing in this presentation, social justice work, and particularly the concept of bridging and how we can be effective in this time. And then going into some more transpersonal concepts, and I'll break this down a lot more. And so bear with me because I'll be maybe a less linear and just really weave together some concepts, and hopefully by the end you'll understand what I'm talking about. So let's move to the next slide where I'll just, or the slide before that. Is there one before that? Just an empty slide. Okay. So I'll just give you a little more background on myself. And I started studying eco-psychology in the late 1990s. My first teacher was Laura Sewell. And then quickly after, I started being mentored by Carl Anthony. And at that time, I was studying both eco-psychology and also multicultural education and social justice, and really am interested in the ways that people expand their worldviews to address both the ecological crisis and also our social justice crises, which are, of course, the same exact phenomenon. And as I kind of developed my work, also was drawn into the more transpersonal, specifically working with John Davis and being a professor at Naropa for over 14 years. And so I always call myself more of a Buddhist, not fully Buddhist, but very influenced by that. And then for maybe the past 5 years, I've been co-teaching an eco-psychology certificate with Andy Fisher, Linda Buzzell, sometimes Craig Chalquest, and more recently, um, uh, uh, Garrett Barnwell. And so I'm really interested in all of these edges, and of course, the ecological and the social, also mindfulness. As mentioned in my bio, I have a book that's all around ecological narcissism that came out in the last years. But my edges as of late are really looking at a lot of the dream world, and I appreciate how Stephen named this. I have been drawn to, there's been eco-psychologists and transpersonal psychologists that have coined earth dreaming. And then there's a whole other body of work that's around collective dreaming, and of course, Tibetan Buddhist practices of dreaming. And during the election night, I had such a powerful dream. I went to bed feeling pretty brokenhearted. With the loss of the election, it seemed very imminent. And I had a dream where masses of people got together for a conference, and the land I was living on in the dream world, and it's a much longer dream, but one of the emergent properties was as I was walking the land where there were all these people were walking around for these dialogues, there was a huge man-made lake filled with octopuses or octopi, and it was just such a hit for me that in the work that we need to do now, it's so much of about partnering with the um, intelligence of the more than human world, and in fact letting that intelligence and allyship take the lead rather than trying to exert our human egos and knowledge and even wisdom as the lead, and our fixation on always having to have the answers and solve things. Particularly, I work so much around ecological and social issues, and it feels like such a time of lashback and silencing, and not fully, but that's in the ethers, and of course, still doing that work. But in these times, I've been really looking at what are our leverage points, and how do we really embrace our embodiment and the transpersonal and the deeper allyship with the larger, more than human, both sentient and unseen worlds. And so this slide right here really just gives some basics of ecopsychology that I come from, which I don't think Peter Kahn's here. He says, stop talking about those generations, but I'm definitely more of the first generation in ecopsychology, being more of a critical project rather than a field. And of course, it is a field as well, but really in terms of critiquing mainstream psychology for being so individual, privatized, and seeing that the environmental movement is not effective with tactics of shaming and blaming. And I think in our current time, we can also recognize that with so much backlash, the importance of the work of bridging is incredibly important. So if we go to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about bridging. Oh, yeah, and this one, just the transpersonal, at its heart, ecopsychology is a transpersonal movement which aims to connect us with the more than human world, reintegrate our psyches in the natural world, and promote healing. So next slide. Yeah, so I get really nerdy about the work of bridging, and probably many of you are familiar with the book Bowling Alone, and how Putnam really raises this idea of social capita, and just the way we network and how those work to create change. And Putnam identified two factors in that. And one is the social bonding. And so bonding is when we're kind of remaining in our like groups to form connections, which is important. Yet in our current society, so many of us can tailor who we spend time with, what we study, the news we read, like all of our areas. We can have a cocoon of likeness because it's our comfort zone. And so the second area that Putnam talks about is this bridging, where we actually will um, have social capita that cuts across the areas that we don't necessarily, I guess, dance with normally. So people with different political, different gender, races, religions, all of those important. I love the term ambiguous couplings, unusual ambiguous couplings of where we actually dare to go just beyond, or maybe even well beyond our comfort zones in order to connect with other people. And then also, if you're getting the gist of it, really going beyond maybe our capacities for not just appreciating nature, but also accepting that there is intelligence and wisdom from all of the beings of the natural world and unseen worlds that we don't necessarily give as much agencies to. And so there's also John Powell, in partnership with Menendian, have a new book that really speaks so much of belonging and also brings in the work of bridging, building on Putnam, and really saying that we've been pretty effectual with a lot of our social movements, because, as Starhawk would say, we haven't created a place at the table for everyone. Anytime we create a vision that doesn't include a space for everyone, we immediately create another, other. And so really looking at how do we start to use our leverage points in bridging. And most of us in eco psychology, there's such a radical nature of it. We may feel like we're right, we have this movement, but how are we really working at those edges to bring others in? Yeah, and so let's go to the next slide there as well. Yeah, and then I just love the metaphor of bridges as really getting into two different terrains, and really bringing the liminal, creating third spaces. And I myself, I straddle multiple positionalities in my race and my work and culture. And so I always, and the recent book that actually came out 2 weeks ago, The Ecological and Social Healing, it's a second edition, but it's all about women who are straddling multiple positionalities and working between ecological and social issues, and how that opens new spaces for emergences in what healing actually looks like. And so those edges are so important to me. And so, in our current climate backlash, so many of our movement work is blocked, yet there's so many different spaces that we can be doubling down on. And again, not letting maybe our activism and our scholarship and what we believe take background, but starting to do more of that underground work in ways that we're preparing for what comes next, and what is so very now. Okay, so now I'm going to dive into some other pieces. And again, I really appreciate Stephen for bringing in more of the depth psychology and Jungian perspective. So if we can go to the next slide. I was recently asked to write a very short piece for a publication that all the authors were exploring the concept, Jung's concept of anima. And so, of course, this brought me back with eco psychology to the concept of the anima mundi. And Theodore Roszak, in some of his earlier writings, really identified that this concept of anima mundi was really about the Earth Mother, that the psyche of the Earth is very feminine. It's very, very old. This quote, the psyche of the earth herself, that has been nurturing life in the cosmos for billions of years through its drama of heightening complexification. And many of you are probably aware of the work of Chalice Glendinning, and how she puts forth this idea of the primal matrix, mapping on the work of Christina and Stanislav Grof. And primal matrix is also this energy of our original state of being, and much more complex than we'll get into. But again, this anima mundi as this animating force of earth that pervades all of us. And I love that quote, that human, Rozak also says it's one of the oldest myths of humankind, the ancient cross-cultural archetype of Mother Earth. So again, we're mothers. And Rozak himself um, recognized that there were some, complexities with the gender binary of the concept of Mother Earth, and more we see that. And really, it's very metaphor, because each of us obviously are a combination of feminine and masculine energies and the non-binary. So we can pinpoint that there. And then yeah, this you're right on time. And so then the Animundi then got more concretized to this idea of world soul, which really brought us more into the kind of patriarchal European domains. And so really looking at how this world soul kind of repressed the notion of the feminine at a time that also mirrored the times of mechanistic science, colonization, the rise of Christianity and other more formalized paternal religions, abstract written religions, and the same time as the witch burnings, the mass genocide of pagan, earth based people, mostly women, and also just the demonizing of both women and earth-based traditions. And so Devereaux, who was mentioned yesterday as well, tracing the demise of the Anima Mundi back to the 17th century with this age of the rational. And then this backlash obviously continues today, so strongly today with the suppression of women. And I'm very US centric, of course, but also looking at global corporatization across the planet and this silencing of Mother Earth. And so we have all of these repressions going on. And then if we go to the next slide and really looking at the concept of anima and animus with Jung's work. And so, anima is a very Jungian term and in very curt language, it's the unconscious shadow of man. I mean, all the Jungians are, wait, there's so much more. There is so much more, and very curt with the animus of the unconscious shadow of women. And again, Jung himself recognized the complexities and with the gender binaries there, maybe using different language. And then so many people critique the trouble with the anima in terms of all of the repression it specifically does in demonizing women as these shadow concepts and just pushing it underneath. And I know this, again, this is very curt. And Jung did acknowledge that in indigenous cultures, this concept of soul as anima was the magic breath of life or a flame. And so again, this animating quality of the world, the mother, this energetic, that's so very important to our times. And so I've really been so excited about releasing the release of this repressed anima that we're seeing right now in terms of repackaging, repurposing the anima as this divine feminine energy. And that's really breaking through in forms we can't even control, and most of us aren't even maybe noticing and naming. And also realm that we can easily dip into with our practices, our chthonic grounding work. And so through embodiment, through our relationships, through our dream work. One of my colleagues, Craig Chalquist, has the whole body of work around parapsychology and looking at the animating energy of the direct places that we inhabit around cooperation with the more that both the human world and our belonging and our bridging, but also making this so much deeper and connecting with the more than human worlds of nature and the unseen. So yeah, I'm gonna stop. Well, maybe go to the last slide so people can see. Yeah, this one's actually important. I'll just name this. The anima reclaimed as the feminine earth psyche. That's my vision, where she is primordial, experiential, and ultimately, as all with all Sigis, merges the gender binaries and truly alive, lives outside of abstract concepts, swimming amongst and originating the emotions, spontaneity, the irrational, the creative. And so, again, not something that we can do as armchair academics, but it's the practice, the invoking, the listening, the being. maybe just go to the last slide with the references. As any good academic, we have to have our references, and they're really too small to see. But I just wanted to name that too. And yeah, then let's go to some questions.
Thank you so much. Beautiful presentation. And I put the invitation out to our online attendees for them to send any questions. And at this point, I don't see anything, but Judy, you're in the room and maybe you can address the people in the room.
Hi, my name is Nick. I'm like, where does my face? Where's my face? Me too. I am currently reading your book, the collective narcissism one. And yesterday there was this. You were. I'm good to know that you were in the room yesterday, virtually, but. The presentation around zoochosis and linking that to CPTSD in humans, I felt like really connected to what I'm learning in your book and like what I'm feeling just like in general, like just self-revelations that I feel like are being reflected in other humans, and also now I'm like learning sort of the nature, like how interconnected that is to nature. So yeah, if you wanted to talk about that, like link or what you think about that, it just kind of was like, oh wait, this like we're all trauma. Sort of what you were saying in your presentation today, of like we're all ill and traumatized, and so I feel like we're both internalizing this collective narcissism and suffering from this collective like CPTSD. So yeah.
Oh, well, yeah. And thank you so much for reading my book. I almost thought I should do a presentation on that, but sometimes I'm like, oh, I've talked so much about it. But yeah, I think that's, and I did catch that presentation yesterday. And yeah, it was, again, heartbroken. And I think that is something so important. Because in my book, talking about collective narcissism and how our society really breeds us to be this way. And then I think even the those of us that are doing the work of ecopsychology and addressing the ecological crisis, sometimes we can still have levels of silencing the animal and more than human nature realms in terms of we're advocates for them, or there was talk yesterday about ecotherapy where often we're using nature for our well-being, or even studying so much of the statistics, yet not necessarily seeing animals and other beings as actually smarter and wiser than us. There's so many, I think, eco-psychologists, environmental activists that have written books about how angry they'll be if they have to read another book about animals having intelligence, but yet every 6 months a new one comes out. So it seems like there's such an edge on actually learning how to shift our minds to partner with more of the different various minds in the natural world. I noticed this with my own practice when perhaps I'm more in the last couple of weeks, I've had some snake encounters, and I notice how my mind just shifts into some zone that's not familiar to me, but I feel that energetically and mentally so much. And at first I identify it as fear, but then I realize that it feels like there's some sort of communication happening, but I haven't become sharp enough, tuned enough to really catch all the messages. And so I think I'm going off on a tangent, but with the captivity of animals and the deadening of their messages and using them for entertainment, how important it is to repurpose all of this and to actually dive deeper into having all of these animals as our teachers, our elders, and not just animals, but other living beings.
Anyone else have questions, comments? Oh, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Jeanine. A wonderful presentation. I just wanted to kind of build on the theme of partnering with the non-human world. And I was struck by your dream about the octopi in the man-made lake. I've actually had a series of octopi dreams as well, but it involved them being on a sort of conveyor belt, an assembly line. And anyway, but they always came back to life, which was interesting in this dream. But I guess I'm curious, what would you say around, beyond sort of partnering with the non-human world in our kind of everyday encounters with nature, how would we do that when in some ways the capitalist system, the sort of socio-political climate is sort of set up in a sort of de facto exploitive relationship to the non-human world? Like, how do we become more conscious in our day-to-day lives when we're not interacting with nature, the way, like, of the ways in which our actions don't kind of walk our, don't walk our talk, or don't, I guess I just like, how do we awaken to that partnership when the systems around us are sort of designed to keep us asleep?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think so much of it is about practice and the pattern breaking of these kind of samskaras, these ruts that we're taught that these are the conditionings and this is the way we need to be. I appreciated how Stephen mentioned meditation, and I feel like meditation is a massive undertaking that we should all be, doing. And I particularly like to do it outside. So I'm not just, closing my eyes and shutting down, but opening. And then we can all be connected through eating healthy food, which is an earth connection right there. I so much I think is about the practice of wherever we are, spending time in nature. Everyone here is obviously into nature, and so there's no excuse for not being in nature. Even if we're in the most urban zone, we're still in nature. Even if we're just in our bodies, locked in a, wherever, we're still in a natural wild place. And so really attending to that. Gosh, there's so many pieces. I think the dream world is another thing that unless you're not practicing dreaming or having dreams, that we can connect with the more than human realms. As I've been more intentional about it, I've been having, there's the octopi, more recently, just elephants showing up at night. And I've been in Arizona and the rufous bobcat. And in a way, that's not just like the image, but actually that tactile touch between us. And so that sentience. And so it's in such a different way. I think so much also just the work around being able to drop into worldview construction and being able to unpack our habitual mind and seeing these self-reflections of our habits and how we can have leverage points for change with reflecting on our own stories, the way we interact with others, the tensions in between those. And yeah, I could go on for hours because there's, I think, no lack of things that we can be doing.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'd like the reflection on the dream world as a sort of a location where these more than human intelligences can really make themselves known, and in some ways reverse that hierarchy, a place where we can really listen to that, maybe that anima mundi speaking to us directly. Yeah, thank you so much, Jeanine.
Oh, thank you.
Jonathan, do you have
Maybe
anything?
I'll just read a comment here from Heather, who's helping us with the online support. She says, "Thank you for your presentation. This is an area I very much feel needs to be seen more, and love the work you are doing. Within my practices and work, I help others reconnect with our Mother Earth and all the beings that live upon her."
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you for everyone. Yeah.
Okay. I think we're at time. So thanks so much, Jeanine.